My name is Flavia. I'm the author of a study on an artist by the name of Gaetano Federici, who was the principal artist for the creation of the amazing and huge and transcendent sculptures that appear on the Church of Our Lady of Loreto in Brownsville in Brooklyn. I'm concerned because although the world still thinks at this moment that Our Lady of Loreto, which was threatened by demolition for quite a while, has now been saved, that there are elements in the process, ongoing process of supposedly saving it, that are eventually going to erode its survival and create a situation where it will no longer be viable. So I am here to talk about the process that we underwent to attempt to save the church, why it is so important to save, and what can be done now, perhaps, if people have the will and the strength of conviction, to make sure that we are not caught up in a process that eventually will result in the doom of this place rather than its amazingly beautiful survival into another century. Our Lady of Loreto has an august history, is a history of people transcending their own situation and creating something that is bigger and more beautiful than themselves. That is what I always celebrate as an art and cultural historian. That is what we have here with Our Lady of Loreto. The effort to save it originated in a group of people who remembered it fondly, who had a sentimental attachment to it, who were associated with it by attachments of their own personal history. There were still community people using the church who had become themselves attached to it, even though they weren't associated with the Italian-American community that originally built it. The building commands respect and love on its own terms and had involved many, many people in the community in an impassioned will to see it preserved instead of a pile of rubble, which was what the Brooklyn Diocese had intended for it. That struggle was a long and arduous one because the diocese, who are really people who are concerned with their bottom line and with their own survival, felt that this was a real estate boon to them to sell the property and rehab that property, turn it into housing, and to create an alternative use for the site. What they couldn't see was that they could do what they wanted to do, build housing, create a community benefit in the shape of affordable housing, and save that wonderful structure, which means so much to this community, and create a synergy between people and structures, which is absolutely what communities need. The plan of the group that came together to fight the demolition brought in some absolutely brilliant community people who had vision, who designed a project that was enhanced the project, the housing project that the diocese had proposed, and offered more housing to the community, and still protected the building and foresaw it as a cultural and community center into the next and the next and the next generations. It was a viable project. It was a doable project. It had the full endorsement of the community, local and larger. It had the support of people in New Jersey because the Federicis were originally from New Jersey, and the sculpture on the church is the largest representation of Gaetano Federici's work in the United States. This sculptor amazingly has contributed 40 public monuments to the city of Paterson, New Jersey, and his father's firm is still a subject of historical endearment in that community. So the City of Paterson Historic Preservation Commission had got behind this. The larger community of North Jersey had got behind the saving of the church. They all saw that this vision for the preservation of Our Lady of Loreto would serve not just the past, but the present and the future of Brownsville. It would acknowledge the people that had lived there. It would tell the story of that passage and the transition from one ethnic community to another, and it would capture that wonderful story of the creativity and brilliance of the artisans and artists who came from Italy in the late 19th and early 20th centuries to give us so much of our beautiful craftsmanship of buildings. And it would have served really important cultural purposes for the community. That plan had all the backing of all these groups, as I said, and it was so powerful and so convincing that it finally turned the diocese around. However, in the process, other forces were engaged that we can refer to as corporate power structure that do not have the full interests of the community at heart. And although the building that they wanted to preserve would be preserved, they still reduced the number of housing units. They excluded the community from conversations about how the buildings would be constructed. They characterized everyone in the community as stakeholders without actually giving them a voice at the table. They brought in corporate homeless rehabbers like Common Ground, who have no close investment in the community, but who really do well by so-called doing good. All the critical decisions affecting the future of the church, the type of housing, the quality of the housing, the number of the housing units, whether the rectory would survive, whether there would be parking up against the church, all those things they have now already decided or are in the process of deciding prior to activating any process that would include the community in that conversation. So the very community that worked to save the church and worked for years to save the church and invested time, money, love, effort, conviction, and a steady stream of passion in the work of saving this church are the last people who are named on the list of supposed stakeholders in a process document that has been created by the corporate group of investment housing experts that has been brought in now via Catholic Charities and the diocese to dominate this process. I have commented to those folks inside that they are missing the point, that you can't have a model that is a community model without inviting the community in to talk about it first. You do not any longer in this day and age, in the 21st century, hand me down a model to the community by benefaction and say, we know what is best for you. The Italian-American community, the African-American community, the Latino-American community that live in this area and who have a passion and investment in the survival of this place, they are the horse that should be pulling this cart and not the other way around.